Welcome to the Skinwalker Debrief. I'm your host, TJ Allard, and I'm one of the executive producers on the new TV series on history called The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. I'm joined each week by Jason McClellan and Maureen Elsberry, and together we dissect each episode to give you more insight into the show. Jason has been exploring all the strange for more than a decade. He's appeared on Nat Geo, Sci-Fi, History, and he's the author of Only Weirdos See UFOs, an introduction to the public's misperception of unidentified aerial phenomenon and extraterrestrial life. And Maureen is a journalist, researcher, and podcaster specializing in the anomalies. She starred in the docuseries Uncovering Aliens on Animal Planet and served as the ambassador for Science Channel's Are We Alone initiative. And tonight, our special guest is none other than Erik Bard, plasma physicist and principal investigator at Skinwalker Ranch. Erik, thank you for joining us tonight. We're excited to talk to you.
Thanks for the invite.
This is great. So before we go too far into anything else, can you tell us a bit about your role? Can you explain to everyone what you do on the ranch on a regular basis?
Well, as principal investigator, my role is basically observational. I think I make the point, in the program that the first phases of what we've done since the beginning of our work in 2016 was basically just take the data, see if we can find in our data streams, including video and audio and seismic and infrasonic and electromagnetic measurements, see if we can find anything that correlates with the narrative that we've inherited. See if we can find anything that corresponds with some of the rich history that's been part of the Skinwalker story since going back to at least the 1990s and well before.
So typically the way we run through the show, when there is an episode on, we go through the blocks. And for those who don't know, in television, there are blocks, A block, B block, and C block, D block. In this case, we go all the way to F. And so the blocks are essentially the space between the commercials. So as soon as you come back into a show, we would initially start with the recap of the previous episode. And the way we left off, because now we've been off a week, and we left off with the last episode, High Strangeness. Not to get too deep into it, but Erik, just give us the real quick, we saw something in the sky. What was it?
I don't know if I want to touch that.
All right, then.
Plead the fifth.
Yeah, plead the fifth. Okay.
I plead the scientific fifth.
Yeah.
What have people been saying to you about that? Like since it had happened, what do people talk to you about? Like, I'm sure you're bombarded with questions. So what are the most obvious you get, and what have your responses been?
I enjoy a certain degree of insulation, insofar as I don't have any social media presence at all. And I think that works well for me. I haven't seen a lot of questions about what's been shown on the television program. And I've just been focusing on the ongoing work since the program began. I can imagine that there's quite a bit of discussion taking place, but I haven't really been a part of it.
So this, since there isn't an episode this week, Erik, Jason knows, Maureen knows, the internet kind of threw up a whole bunch of questions for you once we put it out there. I saw Maureen posting stuff, Jason posting stuff, I was posting things. So I think the best way would be to kind of just get into questions. But I think maybe this week, let's have, so we have some email questions first. Let's go to Jason, why don't you go through the email questions with him? And then Maureen, you could hit the Twitter ones, and then I'll take the Facebook questions that we got. Is that cool? Does that work for you guys?
Yeah, that
Sounds
works.
Good. But can I start with
a
quick question, an overview question? Because I know a lot of people have asked this. And, Thomas tried to cover just like a really brief statement about this last episode. But there's been a lot of people who have questions on how you've set up the surveillance equipment. Like, what is that like? How many cameras are on the ranch? How are they connected with the, I know that they're hardwired, but I think like a really brief overview of that would be super helpful to people.
Yeah, sure. So in the beginning, when we came onto the property, there were no functioning surveillance assets at all. And we took the approach of minimal invasiveness. We didn't really want to deploy too much. Particularly, I didn't want to broadcast a lot of RF meaning a lot of electromagnetic signals into the environment. So we went with a wired system, really a very simple, minimalist system to just watch the property, particularly on the east end of the property. And we began recording video, and shortly thereafter I began taking some other measurements, including some that I've mentioned a few times, including seismic and infrasonic and electromagnetic measurements, looking for transients, looking for correlations between things that might take place in all of those data streams.
Pretty decent explanation.
Yeah, I mean, if there's some other aspect of the question that you're interested in, I'd be glad to field it, or at least try.
No, you know what? Something we haven't talked about yet, Erik. There's been a lot of so the way these systems were set up, when I went out there, something you guys did was really unique, and it was about the bunker, like building these bunkers, these underground bunkers.
Oh, sure.
So I don't think we've actually gotten any insight into that. So what was it before, and then what did you do to prevent all of the problems that were happening, or to try to stop as many problems as you could? So how did that come about, like these bunkers?
Sure. So I think what you mean by problems are equipment malfunctions. Is that
Yes,
right?
exactly what I mean.
Yeah, sure. So one of the ideas early on, which eventually became part of our program, was an underground location where we have, electrical power, and we have network connectivity, so that we can put some equipment in that location beneath ground level and take the measurements that I've spoken of, including the seismic infrasonic in the beginning, and then adding to that electromagnetic measurements. We have probes that stick up above the ground. And so we've basically got a continuous data stream that I can monitor from basically anywhere. That allows me, there's a signal that comes to me from the platform that I've named Satan, that alerts me to any kind of unusual peaks, anything that really I can define what's interesting to me, and see if I get them into that type.
And
does that mean you're? Oh, sorry.
No, Stan. And these things look like underground sewer, like concrete sewer tunnels, essentially.
Yeah, sure.
Like
so we've got we've referred to it. I don't want to be irreverent, but we've referred to the location as a Satan pit, right?
Yes.
The idea is this platform is beneath the ground level, and it sits there and just it's monitoring things right now. And so during the live stream, which you may remember, there were some graphics sometimes in the lower portion of the screen, and you were looking at live output from a couple of those platforms.
Maureen, I'm sorry, I had to cut you off, please.
Oh, no, it's okay. I was just wondering then if you're sitting at home and your phone's blowing up all the time with alerts 24/7, instead of seeing if somebody's stealing your package, is somebody mutilating a cow. That's a bad example, but you know what I mean.
Sure, I think I know what you mean. So what I'm looking for are unusual signals that go above the background level. I'm particularly interested in certain frequency ranges, as you might imagine. And I'm really excited when I see something happening in the visual field of the cameras, or something that I can hear in the audio stream that correlates with the measurements that I've mentioned on the Satan platform.
Nice. So do we want to, let's just jump into the rest of these questions. Whichever one of you wants to get them first.
Yeah, sure. We'll go through the email questions first.
Sure.
All right. We have an email from Chris, and Chris asks, would like to clarify that during lookout events involving batteries, do the batteries die and all electrical potential is equalized? Or is it that due to some field, the electrons in the batteries don't flow? In other words, do you ever see devices that don't work seemingly due to low voltage, but then later work without charging?
There are a few questions embedded in that question, and they're all good ones. I really like that one. As coincidence would have it, when I was a graduate student, I worked in a company that manufactured battery chargers and maintenance circuits. And so I'm pretty familiar with charge and discharge algorithms. In other words, how we manage battery power, both charging the batteries up and making sure that they're not damaged during use. I ran a test lab for batteries, and so one of the things that we sometimes overlook when we talk about battery malfunction is the fact that there's actually a circuit that usually governs the flow of current in and out of the battery. I don't want to bore you with the details, but one of the important points going to this question is that sometimes I'm convinced what we're seeing is not damage or even a malfunction of the battery itself, but of the circuitry whose job it is to maintain the health of the battery. Did that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And there's some follow-up to that. It's really interesting. We see a lot of times with our mobile devices, we see anomalously high rates of discharge. We see, for example, our cell phones may 1 minute indicate that they're at 50% or even 90% charge, and moments later we'll see that they're shutting down. They're at 1%. What happened? Well, that can be due to a depletion of the battery itself, but it can also be due to really a malfunction, something that is interfering with the circuitry whose job it is to monitor the state of health or state of charge of the battery. And I have some evidence to support the idea that it's really the latter.
So before we going to the next question, Erik, you and I had an experience with my phone while we were there. And I saw it on the table during the first episode. At least I believe that was it.
It's still out there.
Yeah. So can you kind of explain? So my phone bricked while we were there, just like a lot of other people's have.
So
but we could.
I'm sorry. Have you shared this story before?
No, I really haven't. So please, I would love your technical presentation of it. Like, what happened to my phone, Erik?
Well, I think it might be instructive, if you're willing, for you to describe what you saw as the guy just holding the device, and then I can jump in with the technical side. Is that okay?
Yeah, please. So what had happened? I think was this after you had to check my heart rate that was jumping up to like 170 or 200 as we were doing things on the ranch.
You reported that your heart rate was registering 176, and
on the meter.
Right. And when I got out there, I did manually check your pulse, and I think it was 124.
Okay. So we were still up there, but for no reason. There was no reason for it to be that way. And then my phone, so what I had done is I believe that the charging meter, I plugged it into charge because it had just stopped. It shut off. Our drone died. One of the cameras died. Some audio died. And then my phone just bricked. And so I tried to plug it in. It just sat there plugged in. Nothing happened. I brought it inside to Erik, and I was like, Erik's laughing at me like, what are you doing, man? I'm putting it in the freezer. I'm doing all this nonsense. And he's like, I don't know if that's going to help. I don't think you're supposed to. No, don't do stuff like that. Just, we plugged it in. And ultimately I was like, look, I can't get this to work. I'm going to have to get a new phone. You know what? Here, it's yours. Just do with it what you may. And we never got it, or I never got it going again, but you did. You brought it back to life somehow.
That's right. So this was a Samsung phone.
Mm-hmm. A Galaxy S8.
Correct. And so when you gave me that phone, I'm not a phone expert, so I decided to take it to one of the repair outlets, and I requested that we get a diagnostic as to what the heck was wrong with it, but I didn't want it repaired. So I instructed the gentleman who took the phone, just take it apart, see if you can figure out what's wrong with it, and let me know. And he give it back to me in pieces, because I've got some ideas of what I might do with it afterwards. And so shortly after dropping it off, I got a call from these guys who said, the battery's just dead. It's basically inside out. And so I asked them about the date code on the battery. They told me that it was not so old that it should have reached end of life. That was interesting. So again, this gets into the weeds. I'm afraid that this might be a little tedious for some, but
no, I think people really want to hear this stuff, Erik. Like seriously.
Well, I hope that's the case. So I purchased a new battery. I took the original battery and I took the phone in pieces back to the lab with me, and I discovered that I was able to trick the phone into charging your your dead battery that had been so deeply discharged that it was latched out. Basically the circuitry was not allowing it to accept a charge. I resuscitated it and took it through several charge and discharge cycles and found that your phone worked just fine.
I can't believe it.
And that was puzzling. I thought, okay, well, maybe it was a one-off kind of an exception. Something happened out there that latched your phone off, and all it needed was, effectively a jump start by some non-conventional playing around with the insides, which you can only do if the phone's open. So I discovered later, however, that if the phone discharged, to what would normally be the shutoff condition, it latched out every time. In other words, there's some kind of permanent damage. Going to the point that I made earlier, there appears to be some kind of permanent damage to the circuitry whose job it is to manage the battery. And I found that that this same condition applies to both the old battery and the brand new one that I purchased. So that means that ownership of the problem is somewhere inside the main body of the phone. It's not just in the charge management board on that lithium battery. Mm-hmm. And that's right in line. I mean, look, you talked about a drone malfunctioning. You talked about some problems with camera equipment. Look, this is not uncommon. This is something that we deal with episodically on the ranch. Right. There's something interfering with our devices. And as far as I'm concerned, that's data.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, if I witnessed this firsthand, I lost my phone. I had to get another phone, and we busted our drone. So, but anyway, no, that's great. Thank you for the explanation. And then we found some kind of random, what was that, like robot Terminator looking thing? Did we ever determine what that was? So he stripped everything down and he tried to boot up the operating system, and some freaky ass looking robot graphic was just showing up on it. Like my phone had been hacked. And it's like, what is this, man?
I have no explanation for that. I have no idea what the hell that was.
I'm going to find a picture for everybody, and you guys can tell me. Maybe somebody will know what it is.
Absolutely, someone out there will know what it is.
Well, absolutely.
Well, sure. I mean, it looks like a background. It looks like a screen background. I don't know why it would be on there.
It made no sense.
If you didn't put it on there, I sure didn't.
It was like a graphic from a ROM or something that someone had side loaded onto the phone, but I didn't do any of that. Yeah. And so it was like either someone had hacked my device and kind of ran something underneath, which I don't think happened because I don't put it in positions like that. But anyway, Jason, please go on to the next one here. So because we are going down in the phone road. So
all right, let's jump to the next question, and this is a question that covers two different things. Betsy asks, have you seen the shadow people? If so, please describe. And also, have you seen a portal open up?
So I don't know who the shadow people might be. I have heard reports of sort of amorphous black, I might even say humanoid forms. Other people have given reports like that. I've never seen anything like that. And I'm not sure that I would recognize a portal opening up. I'm not sure what the evidence is of a portal opening up. I don't know what that is yet. Yes. So no, I haven't seen it. But again, I've had other folks who have visited on the property, or people who have been there before, describe to me what we have termed a portal or a window opening up. And if I ever do see it, I'll let you know.
And to add to that, you did say, though, you mentioned something, and please correct me if I'm wrong. While I was on the ridge one night we were there because we were there so many. One night, the sulfur smell that I picked up, is that somebody said, wasn't that an indicator? Now, I didn't see anything, but I definitely, there was something that made my hair stand up, and I smelled something. And so you were explaining that. What was it that people have told you I was experienced?
So what's interesting, and I've been made aware that there are some questions about why sometimes we see our personnel wearing these hydrogen sulfide detectors, and it goes right to this question. As it turns out, the sensation of smelling sulfur can be exactly what it seems to be, and that is that there are some sulfur compounds in the air, and we're just smelling, right? But there's another thing that can take place. And I suspect that might account for some of these instances where people think they're smelling burning tires or smoke or burnt toast or sulfur. there's a phenomenon known as phantasm, if I'm saying it right, wherein we can have what's known as an olfactory hallucination. We can have the very real sense that we're smelling a sulfur compound when in fact it's just something taking place within our brains. And as it turns out, this is something that can be induced by a transient into the magnetic field. And that lines up with some of the other things that have been discussed on the show.
Jay, do you want to hit the next one?
Let's jump to the next one. The next question comes from Tom, and Tom asks, regarding the vertical light beam over the ridge. Travis asked if there was a parking lot behind the ridge. Is it possible that this is a light pillar from a light source somewhere behind the ridge?
I love this question. First of all, Travis's response was exactly the same as mine. First time I saw that, I said, there's got to be somebody beaming a light into the air. I'd seen it on enough occasions that didn't seem plausible, unless there's a really long-running event going on. But the question about light pillars, that was exactly my conjecture about what might be going on there. Now, there's an interesting wrinkle on this. I've been on the property before when the CCD cameras, meaning the sensor inside the camera, is picking up that vertical light feature, and I've gone out on the helipad and I can't see it with my eyes. So what I take from that is that it may contain a weak visible component, but it could be something happening in the near infrared. Now, I don't jump to the conclusion that we're looking at something exotic when we see this. It's just unusual. And so light pillars, as a topic, I think is a good place to start in looking for what we might consider a mundane explanation for it. This is just one of those opportunistic observations. It's something that stands out, and it has happened several times in our footage. I like that.
All right, the next question comes from Joe, and Joe asks, is it possible that the gilsonite combined with the minerals is creating a natural or designed battery, capacitor, semiconductor, and or circuit?
I love this question. I love it.
I knew you were going to love this.
I hope we have more questions like this. This is the kind of discourse that I really think we should be engaging in. It's not that I'm looking for, prosaic treatment of every one of the things that we see out there. There's a really rich body of scientific research going on that may, in fact, involve the gilsonite. There's some really interesting geophysics. Early on, I did some research into what might be an explanation for the orb phenomenon. You're probably familiar with the stories of balls of light rolling around. Well, there's a phenomenon that has been given the name earthquake lights. Perhaps you've heard of it. Mm-hmm. And there's some really good research, actually fairly late breaking, going back to about 2014. And there are some individuals who have prolifically treated this topic, talking about rift basins, and in particular, these what are referred to as vertical dikes of dissimilar materials, they didn't name gilsonite, but I'm saying, you have a material that is dissimilar from the surrounding material that runs in these vertical veins. Again, I'm a physicist. I'm not a geologist. I'm not a geophysicist. So I don't want to speak out of turn. But I find some interesting alignments between the discussion of earthquake lights and what's unique about the geology there in the Uinta Basin. And maybe the gilsonite plays a role. It does have dissimilar physical properties from the surrounding materials.
I don't know if this has happened, and it's just because people keep asking me about this, and it's making news articles not related to the ranch. But have you ever had the hum phenomena happen on the ranch?
Is this the same phenomenon that is associated with a place called Taos?
Well, it's happening all over the world, actually, which is the strange part. But I believe Taos has a centralized area where that is going on as well.
Right. Yeah, I've read something about that, and there are on the internet what purport to be even recordings of strange sounds that might be part of that. I don't think that I don't think what I'm hearing is the same thing, but I am picking up some sounds for which I don't have an assignable cause, and it is a humming. In fact, not only is it a humming, it's a pulsating, humming, almost grinding sound. And the first thing that comes to mind, of course, is, well, perhaps we're picking up on something from the surrounding oil and gas industry, that we have there near the ranch. I don't know. The time characteristic, I'm told, doesn't line up with the way those industries do their drilling activities and their pumping activities. So, yes, there are sounds, but I don't know if this is the same hum.
Sure. That's very interesting, though.
Yeah,
I'm going to start a whole new line of talk with that.
It's quite haunting if you listen to it. Sometimes quite loud.
Yes, it is scary. I've heard this.
It's violent enough to shake the insides of the cameras whose microphones are picking it up, and so I have, you've got to understand, my job is not to sensationalize. My job is to try to find assignable cause. I won't call it mundane, but at least something that harmonizes with reason, right? We don't have to go straight to the interdimensional and the exotic in order to find an explanation for everything that takes place. And so, when I've got a humming sound or a buzzing, pulsating sound such as I often hear, I'm looking for, perhaps this is some kind of transformer noise, or maybe it's something that's coming in on the electric lines, onto the property. So far, I haven't been able to pin an explanation on
it. The fact that you just mentioned potentially electric lines or other mundane explanations, like, people want to hear that, because a lot of people think like, oh, I cracked the case. Did you think about the power lines? Well,
right.
Of course I thought about the power lines.
Sure.
But not that that's a bad thing. I mean, all this feedback is great, but still.
Right, and I don't want to shut down that kind of discourse. Right. In fact, I want to encourage it.
Absolutely.
The more people start thinking about this critically, I think the better, at least one of the agendas here at the ranch is served, and that is let's elevate the quality of the discourse, and let's think about, let's go through the due diligence, the process of elimination. And who knows? Somewhere in there, we're going to find something that really defies prosaic treatment.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So where did we leave off? Are we on to? We're still on email.
Let's jump one more question from email. This question comes from Ryan, and Ryan asks, have you or anyone at the ranch seen any craft like the ones the Pentagon posted the other day? And if so, how many different types of craft have the crew witnessed since being on the ranch?
I can only speak for myself. I think that it would be inappropriate for me to preempt anything that might be shared by the other members of the team. And not only that, I think I would do a poor job of paraphrasing what they have seen. The short answer to have members of the team seen what they interpret as craft over the ranch is yes. My answer is, I'm going to toe this line. My answer is I have seen things in the video footage for which I do not have an assignable cause. It doesn't mean that I'm dealing with UFOs, okay? It doesn't necessarily mean that this is something exotic. It could be anything from aircraft that are not self-identifying. For example, there's a system called ADS-B or UAT, they broadcast and identify normally in controlled airspace. They're supposed to do that. Well, perhaps in the area where the ranch is located, we have some aircraft. Certainly, I know there have been cases, at least in the daytime, when I've seen aircraft, but I haven't seen them showing up on my transponder data receivers. So perhaps we're seeing that. But there has been, in particular, there have been two instances that I find really hard to dismiss in that manner. And I don't know how much I should say about that at this point.
Yeah, let's not go too far into it. I mean, I think as we get there.
Right. I don't want to pre.
Yeah. Yes. Let it sit. Simmer a little bit.
Sure.
I was super surprised when I heard that you guys have encountered planes flying over the ranch that aren't putting out a transponder signal. I mean, that to me was crazy to hear that you've encountered that more than once. I mean, that's just bizarre.
Yes,
planes.
A lot of times, and not just planes, helicopters as well.
Yeah.
And not being a pilot, I don't know whether they can just flip a switch and turn that off. I don't know what we're dealing with. There are there. I would assume at least a lot of them look like private aircraft, and perhaps they routinely don't broadcast self-identification. I don't know.
A lot of potential explanations there, and I think as we go on, hopefully we'll continue to peel back the layers on that. Sure. But so that was Ryan's question. You said, Jason, that was the last one. Oh no, I'm sorry. Yeah, that was the last one.
Last one we'll do from email.
Cool. Maureen, why don't you take the Twitter ones?
Yeah. First off, let me say that don't feel bad by saying they're UFOs. Jason and I always use the phrase, just because they're UFOs doesn't mean they're extraterrestrial in nature or something unusual. It's just unidentified.
That's right.
But I get why you specify, for sure.
Right. I have to say this to you guys. I said that to Erik, and he really appreciated the fact that you two are both looking at it from that standpoint. You're not making the Velcro, therefore aliens jump.
That's right. I'm speaking colloquially when I say UFOs. I mean what people normally think of.
Right.
That you just said, Maureen.
We fought forever with that because we always wanted people to know, just because we're covering and saying something's a UFO, we're not guaranteeing that it's flown by an intelligent extraterrestrial civilization. Not what we're saying.
At that point,
yeah. So I don't know if you've seen this or not, because I know you're not on social media, but I'm guessing someone has shown this theory to you. But Timothy asks, what you think about noted debunker Mick West, his theory. He's taken a stance on against the second UFO sighting on episode 4. He explains the UFO is a plane in close proximity to the plane that is also in frame. Can you comment on this?
So I think it's important for me to make the point that, yes, there was air traffic in the airspace. We did have air traffic. And I know that aircraft frequently fly through the basin right over the ranch, and then for Salt Lake City and beyond. And the point that I would make is that I can account for some of what we've seen. There is one particular event for which I can't. That doesn't mean that it isn't an aircraft. It means that I don't have the data.
I think that, as TJ mentioned, it's still under the wraps, because we asked a question about this kind of last week, Jason and I, when he asked what we'd do further in the investigation about contacting the specific plane that was passing by. So we'll leave that as a tease for a future episode, because I know we'll probably hit that.
So I'll tell you this, just so that it's understood that we do our due diligence. After the fact, I've downloaded what are known as the KML files, which are conveniently mappable onto something like Google Earth, so that I can view in three-dimensional space. I can view the flight path of aircraft from the perspective of the ranch, and yes, I can account for some of the air traffic. Well, I can account for a lot of it that way. There's one particular event that I'm not so sure about.
Yeah. We'll get to that.
And I think we had a good discussion about this last week. Because I think a lot of the confusion that these debunkers who wanted to analyze a TV show entirely too much were commenting on different time discrepancies and things when this thing was happening, and trying to sleuth this thing together. But we heard a pretty good explanation last week, and again, it's TV. The editing it's not happening in real time, and sometimes the B-roll that's used to show something on a screen isn't what's happening at that moment.
Right.
So,
that's an important point. That's really an important point. I don't know if the point was made clearly that the event that was just described, involving a pair of objects, one of them having a contrail and the other one not, was not the first event. And if that point wasn't made, then I'm making it here.
we tried to clarify, like, these things were not necessarily in chronological order, and the images you're seeing on screen as the quote-unquote B-roll, which in the B-roll, they usually refer to a B-roll as beauty roll. So you're showing that to move a story along or to show backstory as someone's talking over it. So just because it's at a timestamp on the B-roll does not necessarily mean that is exactly what you were looking at.
Right. Yeah, I'm talking about the tease about whether or not you contacted the plane to see what they saw, the one you charted. That I'm saying we obviously can't talk about yet.
Right.
Nowhere asks, could Skinwalker Ranch be built over a natural fission nuclear reactor? And by those products, we're talking xenon and neodymium. So, Erik, would this explain the magnetic anomalies, ionizing radiation, the lights, discharges, deleterious health effects, and the wind from the sinkhole?
I don't know about the last one, but, if we had something like a natural fission reactor, beneath the ranch or, perhaps in the mesa or under the fields out there, then I wouldn't be surprised to see some of the effects that have been mentioned. I can't say anything about the prevalence of neodymium or xenon gas, I think was the other one. But I would certainly expect to be able to detect something. And maybe we have.
Okay, we do have Chief asks, when do you intend to release a paper or data on your findings? And do you have a timeline for other releases, developments for the public?
That's not up to me, but it's definitely something that we've discussed. And I guess that's all very TBD.
Yes. I think Brandon is going to get into that a little bit more in weeks to come.
Right. I have to defer to his guidance on that.
Cool. Mm-hmm. I mean, the fact that you're thinking about doing papers and releasing them to the public, scientific papers, is awesome on its own. So I think that's good to touch on.
I think it would be very satisfying to share something of that type with the public. I hope we have the opportunity to do that.
Erik, before she goes to the next one, you had told me something long ago, many moons ago, why this is so important for it to be released to the people, for people to kind of examine this. And I think your quote was something about if this can help you take your...
Right.
Could you I was paraphrasing, but please, could you just kind of speak to that?
I think I know what you're referring to. When I was in Dallas at Alien Con, I remember being greeted by it's interesting that I can actually remember these guys' names, but there was a kid on the street. His name was Miko. And he stopped me and Tom. He said, "Hey, I recognize you guys. You were talking in that session yesterday." And in our conversation, what came out, and as I heard myself say it, I thought, "Hey, this really feels right." And what I said to this gentleman was, "Look, we're all involved in a search of one kind or another, and I think that my search is a success to the extent that it enables, or in some way enhances yours." And I think that's the outlook that I'm approaching my role with. Because I know there are a lot of people, on the next day, I kind of revisited that story with the folks at the Alien Con event. And I don't know how many people were in that room, maybe 500-600 people. And I said, if I were to ask by a show of hands how many people consider themselves truth seekers, how many people are looking for something, I'm sure that every hand in that room would go up. And, I got a lot of nods. And so I repeated that. I just said, look, our search is really only useful to the extent that it helps your search. And so I hope I've made the point clearly enough without belaboring it.
Absolutely. Yep. I think so.
Totally.
So, Erik, we're going to hit there's a few more questions from Facebook, and I'll just jump into them.
Okay.
So we have Claire asks, has Erik ever had any personal experiences on the ranch that have made him feel scared or uneasy? People have previously talked of being emotionally affected on the ranch with fear, and I wondered if he had ever encountered anything like this.
Yes, I have, and I'm in good company.
Okay. We will leave it at that. These are things, again, these answers and stuff that we're getting, just so the audience knows, like, a lot of this, more information will come. We're not being coy to be coy. We're not trying to be mysterious. There are, things will come out as we go on, and I think people will appreciate that more because it'll be in a better context. Larry from Facebook asks, can Erik say if any government agencies have tried to deter them from their investigations on the ranch?
So, I've been asked a question like this before, and I think I should answer the same way now as I have before. So if I were to say no, could you trust the answer? Could you trust me? Right? If I were to say yes and then, go into it after having presumably committed not to share something, then could you trust me? So I think I kind of have to go with the lesser of perhaps three evils, the third one being to say nothing at all. And what I'm going to say is, no, I have not received any instructions from any government entities not to reveal anything or not to research anything. And I hope that my answer is sincere enough that you can weigh out whether you believe it or not.
Excellent. Thank you. This is from Rick Lee Waddell on Facebook. He says, I would like to know what types of vibratory and frequency testing that they have completed on the mesa and the ranch.
So ongoing, we are, as I've mentioned before, we are measuring seismic and infrasonic, meaning sounds that are below the range of human hearing, low frequency sounds, as well as sounds that are in the audible range, and of course electromagnetic frequencies, all at the same time. And so hopefully I've answered the question. Completed? No, they're ongoing.
Excellent. We have just a few more here, a couple more. Anna Marie says, I remember, I believe in the first episode, that there was a discussion of pictures of the mesa being taken with cell phone cameras that were experiencing some odd static or some distortion like that. Why did this not happen to the History Channel cameras?
I love the kind of thinking that is on display here, because that's a perfectly reasonable question. And I can go into the details of what happened with the cameras or the devices that have malfunctioned, but to go straight to the question itself, it has to be understood that whatever is taking place on the ranch is transient, and transient means it comes and goes. It's episodic. It isn't always happening. And I hope that that's a satisfactory answer.
I can add to that as well that it did in fact happen to some of the production cameras at times. That's
right.
So it's not that you're not going to see that. We're not going to necessarily break that fourth wall on the show and just like say, oh no, the production cameras went down. But just know, and I mean, Erik can attest to that there were times where equipment malfunctioned
right.
from production.
That's right. I've seen equipment of almost every kind malfunction and even be damaged by something that is prevalent on that property. But again, it's transient.
Okay. And so the last one we have from Facebook here is from Darlene, and she said, "Can the UFOs and lights in the sky be seen from other locations not on the ranch?"
I think there's a fairly rich tradition, a history of sightings of this kind throughout the basin, in fact. Yes, I know that individuals who have lived near the ranch itself have reported seeing things flying around, some of them luminous, others appearing metallic. But, I don't want to speculate on that. I don't want to interpret that. But the short answer is yes. Others have reported having seen things in the basement.
Awesome. Well, Erik, that is the extent of our questions for right now. Over the week, there were some really good questions in there. I mean, and I think the three of us did a pretty decent job of filtering them out and giving you the ones that actually, I think, you did a great job addressing, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
So guys, I really appreciate questions like this. And, I hope I mean to be receptive to them, and I appreciate the opportunity to field some of them, and hopefully to engage in a lively discourse. All of these are really good ideas that are being put out there. So bring them on.
And now that you've said that, how about you join us again next week, which would be awesome. Because we'll have an episode. I mean, great. I'm happy you're into it. We have an episode next week, episode 5. And people can just keep throwing questions our way. We'll filter them out. And not only would we have these questions, but we'll have an episode to kind of dissect. And what did Tom say, you guys? Tom said this was one of the episodes that's going to produce the most data?
He said the most data, and this is the one he's most excited for, he thinks, because he has not seen it, allegedly.
And that has us very excited.
Yes. Erik, so if you come back next week, we'd love to have you. That would be awesome. And we'll go over the next episode. We'll dissect that, and you can give us some backstory into that as well. So, but for this week, that's it for us on the Skinwalker Debrief. So be sure to join us next week, and we'll be here to dissect that next episode with our special guest, Erik, again. And don't forget to tune in to the History Channel this Tuesday, May 5th at 10 p.m. We're back a regular night, regular time for episode 5 of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. And the title of the next episode is called Dangerous Curves. And just to give you a little teaser, it says, advanced testing shows evidence of strange anomalies under the ranch, and Brandon finally gives the team permission to dig. So I think that'll be a big payoff for everyone. So again, thank you everyone for joining us, and we will see you next week. Thanks again.